Make sure that they can all hear you, or maybe I can point this out to you.
Yeah, you can hear me online, yeah? Well, they
Yes, fine.
Yep. I was going to say we didn't hear them say no, so they can.
No problem.
All right, PDF. PDF. Okay, all right. So a PDF, I mean, we all get PDFs all the time. You can't sneeze without getting a PDF. It's a stream, which is usually a file that contains a series of pages. It's like an object format, and then it's compressed. If you uncompress it and potentially unencrypt it, then you get a very, very old style format that contains an ASN1 stream, I think it is, that contains a series of pages, and then the pages have multiple instructions to print something on the page. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff around fonting and coloring and setup and page layout and page size and all this stuff. But fundamentally, it's just a stream with pages with something to print on the page. And there's some really weird stuff that goes on, which everybody knows. So like here's, where are we? Well, you were here before. Here's a PDF I happen to be working with on the screen for my day job. And so we all know this, right? You're going through and you're copying, and suddenly it copies something else in some other part of the page. This is because when you create a PDF, well, we go through the process and create a PDF, it's just a bunch of random stuff being drawn on the page. And the browser here that's drawn it onto the page is trying to reverse engineer a logical layout out of the sequence of instructions that draw something on the page, doing its best to guess what's going on when you're dragging the mouse over the page to select the text. And sometimes best guess ain't that very good. And it's inherent in the PDF challenge because I've never found a PDF browser that doesn't have this problem, right? So it's not inherent in the way PDF, it's inherent in the way the software that creates the PDF puts the PDF together in order. In as much as you write PDFs, you have some control over that. But most people don't end up having control because there's layers and layers and layers of stuff between their logical layout and the physical page or the logical PDF page. That makes sense to everybody? Okay. Back to the presentation. It's a standard defined by the PDF Association in association with ISO. It says ISO 32000-2. Unusually for an ISO spec, it's free. I have a bitch about that because ISO won't publish my spec because my spec's free. And so they refused, but they agreed to publish this one. So it'd be for me. But the PDF standard itself, it's a PDF. That's very lovely circular. I mean, in some kind of world, it's kind of cool because now they can release PDFs. So standard, but also the PDF standard is a PDF. So you couldn't possibly read it until you read it. Fortunately, there's a whole industry of people doing that, so that's fine. But it's 1,003 pages. It's not a light specification to work with or to even read. And like you can't just open a PDF up. I mean, I don't think I have a hex editor in here. Maybe I do. Let's say we're just going to dump the PDF onto my text editor. Just thinking OS X, not my friend. Why will you not let me do that?
Because it was borrowed from PostScript, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's PostScript. And no, I just want you to open it. Yes, so you can see that the first, I mean, you can always look at a PDF file, and let's just make this a bit bigger, and see that it's a PDF, because it starts with, this one's not compressed or encrypted, but It starts with hash PDF 1.7, which is the format of PDF. There's been 1.7 since about 2002. They haven't like actually changed the format. They just added in extra options and stuff, and then a whole bunch of objects that you can read. The objects themselves are encrypted, compressed. You really don't want to read the stuff, right, or write this stuff, and so everybody does it. Or humans do it through a library, which is what I'm going to look at. All right.
So almost all of them compressed, or did you find one specifically to?
No, I just grabbed on at random. I thought they were. I thought all this stuff was compressed. It has been when I've looked at other documents, but this one's only the objects are compressed. I don't know. I don't care. I mean, I don't look inside PDFs very often. I haven't looked inside a PDF for about 10 years. Back when I was trying to figure out how to actually render PDFs and avoid actually writing all the code or thinking about writing all this code in order to avoid paid code, I did actually look at this. I didn't look at it for very long before I decided I wasn't going to look at it anymore. And I wasn't going to do it. So I didn't write a PDF reader. All right. But there is also additional resources at the PDF Association page. But the PDF Association is just a toy version of Adobe, as far as I can tell. It's interesting because I work in HL7 at health standards, and PDF Association came to HL7 15, 16 years ago and asked us to make a health version of PDF, to which we said, hell no. It probably was a mistake. But anyway, PDF's just everywhere these days. So what can you do with a PDF? You can print to a PDF. You can produce a PDF. You can display the PDF for reading, or you can page scrape the contents of the PDF and get the text out of it to do something with the text in your program, or humans can do it, or you can edit a PDF file. It's actually seriously hard work editing a file, because it's not like a word processor with a logical layout of a logical storyline of text that has relationships to each other, and you add text and it grows, and so it pushes the other stuff, wraps and pushes the other stuff down. The PDF is all laid out in boxes. Your page is a whole series of boxes, and so if you actually add some text and it overflows, where does it go? It doesn't. So that editing a PDF is really hard, but you can annotate the PDF, and there's also a specification in the PDF for a form. I'm sure most of you have filled in PDF forms at one stage or other. It's such a lovely thing to do. Stinking, useless. It's not a very nice form spec for a user. I feel like it wasn't any user representation at the table when they designed the form spec, because I just keep swearing at them going, I want to put the text in, but you're like, let me in, you want, tell me why I can't. And it turns out it's because I've got to put in the right text, but they've got some filter. They haven't shown me what the filter, it's a mess. But you can fill in forms, and in particular, legal and accounting and tax people love PDF forms. That's usually where I run into PDF forms. Or you can also sign the PDF. I am going to show you the first three: producing a PDF, displaying a PDF in your software, and reading the contents, the text contents of a PDF. And should you wish, you could also read the annotations on the PDF document in your software, but I'm not actually going to show you that.
These are non-printable bits, are they? The annotations.
No, the annotations are when someone actually adds a note on top of the PDF.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll show you how to read those. It's all open source stuff that I'll show you. All right. So I'm going to show you how to do. So first of all, printing to PDF is as simple as printing to anything else if you're doing it manually. You have printing support in your software by hook or by crook, usually by crook, but Printing is actually pretty difficult. And of course, you might, if you use a report writer like Report Builder or something, we'll come back to them later, because they typically have wrapped support for PDF. So avoid using the mucking around that I'm about to show you. But as the simplest case, like you're using Word, or you have a word processor with you have a software with an RTF editor or a SynEdit that uses editing, and you go print that to a PDF. Actually, what you do is print, and they will very likely have some kind of PDF driver installed in the printing system, and they'll handle the print to PDF, and you don't have to do anything for that. And it just, whatever you would have put on the page goes on the PDF. On Macintosh, on OS X, PDF is actually the language of printing. It's the same thing. But on Windows, they've got the Windows printing, the GDI interface is what actually does the printing. You'll see that on the next slide. And then they just reverse engineer that back into a PDF, which means that PDFs produced on Windows are usually crappier when you're trying to copy and paste content out of the PDF, because it's more shattered by reverse engineering the PDF out of the Windows GDI routines. Does that make sense? Just love Windows anyway. But then I love OS X less than Windows because I use it all the time. All right. Okay. But you don't have to actually leave that to the user. Here's code that says to the user, put up a print dialog and check print to file. And then if it is print to file, this code I got off the internet, and now I'm looking at it, it's pretty crappy, because you didn't check that the options will stay true. You set it to true and then see if it was true. That's pretty crappy. But you can, with options, you can set print to file dialog, print to file, which is, see this checkbox here? You can pre-check that. So check to file, pre-check print to file. And then when they say if they're going to print to file, then you'll do something that prints it to file. This is actually a pretty weird thing to do, which I grabbed off the internet, but I left it there because actually printing to file, because they said they want to print to file, turns out to be pretty difficult. Just to go back a bit, has anybody here tried print to file with one of these other drivers ever? It actually creates a file that you can't do anything with, because it's in the native language of the printer, and there's no way on Windows for you to do anything with that. I don't know what Microsoft thought they were doing when they designed it that way, but they did.
This copy to the printer raw.
Well, if you have access to the PRM on DOS, you can, but in Windows NT, they shut that off. That is, I believe they shut that off permanently. And so you haven't been able to, since you couldn't just blast it to the printer on PRM.
Yeah, because back in DOS days, you opened the
Back in DOS.
LPT1 or LPT2 or PRM, and
There are some
printing
tools
to it.
that will finally send it.
Yeah, probably there's tools that will do it one way or another, yes. Yeah, probably that makes sense. Yeah, on the DOS, you just did that. That's why they had it there early on, I'm sure, because you could print to the printer, and then you could take it over to the print server. There's a binary file, and there was some software that would load it out of your network or somewhere, and then actually get it to the printer. But most consumer users can't do anything with print to file, and if they use a real printer and then say print to file, what they get is not consumable for them. And then there's also XPS, which is Microsoft's attempt to redo PDF. Because Microsoft, right? Nobody ever used XPS. Did anybody here actually ever use XPS?
And reading to it, couldn't do much.
No, exactly. You couldn't do much with it. It's PDF. Then Microsoft finally bit the end of it, and we go, okay, well, that's PDF file. All right. Okay, but what do you actually do if they say print to file? So here's an example of actually printing to a PDF. So you bring up you set up a print dialog, and I don't know why they mucked around. This person thinks low level, and then you set the print dialog, And you ignore whether the user said they wanted to write to a file or not, and you write to a file name that you provided, which is starting to get useful if you're actually running to write a PDF inline process. Say someone said, mail this to a user as a PDF, right? You don't want to bring up a dialog box for them to do it. So you're starting to get towards, this is still bringing up a dialog box, but now after that ignores the dialog box and actually writes the PDF. So this is the kind of code that you need for writing the PDF. So we get the doc info that we are going to use to write with Windows doc info. This is now heading up printing API directly, which usually you don't do. Usually you use some wrapper. The doc info, set the doc info and say that you are printing the doc info to file name. This is the Windows API doing that. The lovely Windows API, mucking around with string allocation and so forth. But you are printing Stack Overflow, because this was from Stack Overflow, to temp/print/stackoverflow.pdf, so.pdf. Having actually set up the doc, then you start the doc, which starts a print job with the DC and gets a DC for you. And then you start page after page after page to print multiple page. And then you draw using Windows graphic routines, GDI routines, on the page using the DC device context from the printer context. And so this prints page 1 and page 2 on 2 pages. And then it finishes on a second page, finishes the document, and boom, off it goes to the printer. And then you're done. But of course, going off to the printer in this case, well, there's one thing this doesn't do, which is set up the actual print driver. So there's another way you can do that, but I didn't have time to find that. But you trust me, you can. You can find the print driver and nominate the print driver when you're doing this. Now, the next trick is you've got to know the name of the print driver. So go back here. I have 2 PDF printers here, print to PDF from the Mac, because this is Windows running inside my Mac, and Microsoft print to PDF, and then there's Adobe print to PDF, and then there's Fox Pro print to PDF, Foxit print to PDF, and then there's you get the gist, right? Lots of companies have got in on the print to PDF business. So you do need to worry about setting up the correct PDF driver. This is assuming that the print dialog did that. But we don't want to do that if, in general, if we're writing a PDF directly so that we can do something with it, we generally don't want to do that. We generally want to say which driver we're going to use, not that it matters which one we use, just nominate the right one, and then print your content. Then you get the file. After end doc, wait for a few seconds, a few milliseconds at least. Then your doc will be finished and in that file name you nominated. And then you can do whatever you want with the file. The hard thing about doing this way is doing all the GDI work. Nobody wants to do that directly. Everybody wants to wrap that behind something. Back when I was at Kestrel, we wrote our entire own Word report builder because we were like that. And I wrote that. And so I wrote all of this stuff and wrapped it in a report builder framework. And so the programmers never thought about it. The programmers would just say at the very top, I don't want to think about any of this stuff. Just give me a PDF and give it to me as a string, and everything else is wrapped. And that's just because it's such hard work. Like text out 100,000 operations a page to get a nicely formatted, beautiful consumer quality page of content with lines and shading and text and anti-aliasing, and it's just enormous amount of fine detail work. So in fact, almost all report builder equivalents, report builder does it this way, almost all equivalent reporting frameworks, which are basically wrappers that wrap you from doing all that fine work directly, have a way to just say, give me a PDF, give it this file name, and go and do it. Right, and they just handle all those details, and they build the page for you using the report layout that you already gave it. One way or another, there will be some kind of report templating layout. And then you just get this, and then you print, and then you get your file. That then is printing to PDF, unless you decide you want to print to the PDF directly. I don't want to go through any print driver. It's all too much dependence on having print drivers installed, because you do need the user to have a PDF print driver installed, and all the methods I've shown you so far. And it's not hard for a user to have a print driver installed, but it's kind of mucky for you as a consumer corporate vendor to go to a corporation and say, all your users must have a particular PDF driver. You're going to get into a confrontational discussion with an IT department who are like, no, we don't want to do that. So there's one other choice, which is to say, forget the print driver stuff. We're just going to write directly to the PDF itself and avoid the PDF. As far as I know, the only way that's practical to do that in Delphi is to buy Gnostice Document Studio for Delphi, which I actually played around with these guys and used them for a while. This is good software. This delivers.
I've used it for years and years and years.
Yeah, solid as a rock. Do you use it to write or read or both?
I use it for writing, and then I also use the PDFToolkit for doing like PDF merges, things like that.
Yeah. So I can't use it because all my code is open source now. But I did used to use it back in the day, and it was solid as a rock. And you can certainly consider buying it and using it if you want to write PDF. Thank you for the testimony on that. Of course, you still end up with those manky, hard to copy PDFs, but it's not as bad as going through the print driver, because you have slightly higher level language to deal with. But you still have to have, you can write to them directly through Gnostice, the PDF library, or you can hook that up to the report builder and use a report builder, which is probably all you do.
No, the way I've done it is in all my apps, like the text is generated internally in my own markup, and then it basically just writes to a canvas, be it the screen canvas, printer canvas, or PDF canvas.
Yeah, you do all the hard work.
Yeah, but it does mean I can do anything.
That exactly, it does mean you can do anything, which is why we did it that way too. Yeah, and it's actually not hard work, is it? It's just a lot of finicky, fine, detailed work. But you can do the GDI work yourself. Yep, and you can do it directly to Gnostice as well.
Software, it'll read it, PDF as well.
Yeah, it'll read any PDF as well. So I haven't checked, but it did back in the day, so it probably still will. I'm not going to show you reading documents with this because it's not open source, but it totally would work. Yeah. All right. So that brings me to the end of writing PDFs, because really what I want to focus on is displaying a PDF.
Well, one other question with this one.
Yep.
Does it work with Pascal?
I have no idea.
It doesn't have compatibility there.
No.
But it's not unusual for them not to list that as a compatibility thing, but still for it to work.
Yeah.
So just because they didn't list it doesn't mean they don't.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they do, that's for sure.
There may be an assessment that if you're using 3 Pascal, you may not be in the market for a $1,000 PDF library.
Yeah.
May not, but you'd be surprised the number of people in Lazarus community who are.
All right.
Yeah, like they're not all hardcore open source bigots like me. I've got nothing against paid source. I've done a fair bit of it in my life. I'm just not doing it right now. I have to watch my dependencies like a hawk. But there are a surprising number of people in the Lazarus community who are commercial programmers using Lazarus for cross-platform compatibility, not for open source love.
I used a library called Quick PDF, but it ended up getting bought out. It was actually written in Melbourne, I think, and then it got taken over by Foxit.
Yeah, it's just, yes, welcome to IT.
So before Gnostice.
I think I evaluated it back in the day and then just stuck it up and bought Gnostice because it was clearly better at everything and native. Anyway, I mean, really, the situation is that if you, the question really is, how do I want to print? Like, if you want to be like us and print directly to canvas and manage everything yourself, then you can do to PDF via a print drive or directly by Gnostice. But if you want to say, no, I don't want to do all that, that's silly. I can get something effective with RTF or text or with a report builder of some kind that you can still do by PDF or directly by print driver or by PDF. Right. The real question isn't how do I want to do my PDF? The real question is how do I want to do my printing? And that drives the choice that you make. That's the way I look at it. All right. Let's move on then to reading a PDF document. So I'm going to show you how to read a PDF document using Pdfium. The Pdfium is a subpart of the Chromium browser. I use Pdfium because it's free, it's solid as a rock, and it's cross-platform. So pdfium.org is the homepage, which redirects to a set of build instructions because it's really hardcore. We're now in hardcore open software. Then there's a Delphi wrapper, which we're going to spend a bit of time looking at the rest of my presentation, looking at called PdfiumLib. There's the link there to the binary releases of Pdfium, and just to give you a sense of the number of platforms they build for, it's quite a lot. It's quite comprehensive, yes. You can get the source and build it yourself, but I started out this morning to build it myself to show that it was possible. And after a couple of hours, I said, you know, this is just tiresome. Fooling around with Python and Visual Studio, and it's just, let's just download it from here. And so for me, I can get iOS, I can get Linux, I can get Mac, I can get Windows in 32 and 64. It's all good. And so you download and then you distribute the DLLs. No worries. And then I have my own fork of Andrea Hausleiden's Pdfium, which is Lazarus compatible. We'll come back and look at that at the end because you'll see it's work in progress. But this PdfiumLib comes with an example app, which we'll look at in a second. But there is no visual component. We'll get to that in a second. So now I'll just show you the code that you get. The code that you get is Lazarus. Let's make it a bit bigger. So there's 3 units in the PdfiumLib code. The first is the DLL wrapper PdfiumLib. Need to make this one bigger. Which is just a DLL wrapper with all of the appropriate C++, CE crappy stuff that you get in a typical DLL wrapper. I am not going to explore that any further. Then there's the core, which is a set of objects that wrap the DLL. So for instance, you have an object for a document, an object for a page, an object for an attachment, an object for a record for a rect on the page. And we'll come back and look at this object model later. And then you have the control. So the control is a custom control that has a document and that knows how to render the document and then exports an API on top. In the public section here to load from all sorts of sources, to figure out your orientation from your screen metrics to your page metrics for like navigating a mouse click, some text manipulation content, a handle to the document itself, and then some typical content for UI control, and then a bunch of custom control stuff exported. There is no register, so there's no visual component. This happens to be Lazarus, but basically, if you look here, there's no PDF here thingy up here, and the reason is because the PDF control is dependent on the DLL, and if you loaded it into the IDE as a visual control, the IDE would suddenly become dependent on the PDF DLL. I mean, you could manage that, and I've had other components that have worked like that, where you need a DLL to run the IDE, but Andreas doesn't think that's a very good investment, and so he just says we don't do that. And so instead, you get a form, and the form has a private control PDF control, and you create that in the form create the control, set the alignment of the parent, and bingo, done. So for me, I got out of the practice of building user interfaces with a visual form designer for the forms I care about a long time ago. Right? If it's just a dialogue, bang it together, use it, done, then I'll use the form designer. But if it's a main page form that I care about how it works and I'm invested in it, then I'm going to actually build it in code like this. Partly because cross-platform stuff, when font sizes differ, it's really, really hard. I got much more fine control over the appearance of everything if I build it. Okay, it's kind of like printing, right? You're going to pay the price of figuring it out the metrics yourself, which is much slower than just knocking a form together. But on the other hand, you get much more control. So it's a trade-off, right? But for me, typically, if I'm putting a PDF control on a form, I care about the form, right? That's the only situation I'll put a PDF on a form. And so I'll be doing this way anyway. But some people, not so happy, really are used to building the form. And so really what you do is you just put in a panel that's a placeholder for the PDF. And then build around the panel that's the placeholder. And then when you put this on the form, the parent is the panel rather than the form. Right, that's what you do. Now this happens to be Lazarus. We'll switch to Delphi in a second. But if I run this in Lazarus, here we go. And then I open my sample PDF that we were looking at, and here we go. Bingo, done. That's all we had to do to make it work. So we just go back and look at the code. We created the PDF control. We said to automatically fit the PDF by width. And then if it was passed a parameter, we load the parameter. Otherwise, we bring up a dialog box, which you just saw, and then load from the file. Otherwise, we quit. Right? This is not rocket science here. That's for sure. Unfortunately, if I actually try and select this, bang. Because, yeah, well, my port to Lazarus is incomplete. So let's switch to Delphi. And here we are, Delphi. And switching the font size is not so convenient. What did I just do?
Resize the
I don't want the back
screen.
Oh, it's here. I haven't looked at Delphi yet. You can tell how much I haven't looked at Delphi recently. Anyway, this is the example code from Andreas. So we're just going to run this. Because all I did was download and open. I didn't do anything more. And here's my sample PDF we're working with. Here it is. I can scroll. We can switch pages. We're going to have a look at the code for this in a second. We can select text. That'll probably do for our interest sake. We still have oh, we're on the wrong page. I'm on the first page. We still have the weird rendering issues. Less though. PDFium is clever than what was in OS X in terms of this, but there are still some. I have found some before. Now I can't find them. This, by the way, is the Victorian government's official advanced care directive for telling the system what you want so it can ignore you. All right. Now let's have a look at some of these buttons. You see that the Delphi code is the same as the Lazarus code that I just showed you. With the addition of this useless line that doesn't do anything. I don't know. I mean, in my testing, it didn't do anything. But let's have a look at the form. You can't see the form, but that doesn't matter. So go to the previous page, go to the next page. These are not rocket science things. They're very easy to do. Change the scale mode to scale in and out. You can also list the attachments. Should someone have attached a file to the PDF, you can do that. We'll open the same PDF. So these are just previous and next page, nothing to it.
Indent file within the PDF.
Yeah, you can do that with PDF. You can't do that through the print driver. There's no GDI for attach a file to the GDI, the canvas. But if you produce a PDF by other means, or someone can open a PDF in Adobe Acrobat and attach a file. There's ways to do that. It doesn't render, it's just a dot that you can, an icon that you can in the file. You can change it.
Exceed, presumably.
Sorry?
Like an exceed. We can't see things in it.
I don't know. Well, I suppose some software will let you do that, but I'm sure others will. And just trust your local antivirus to quarantine it. I have no idea. I know that if you put an exe file in a PDF and then send it through Gmail, Gmail will actually look inside and say, "We're not having that." You can't they won't let that through. In fact, even if you zip it, it'll just unzip the zip. If the zip is inside, if you zip an exe inside the PDF, I've tried this too, it will still find the executable inside the zip.
Okay.
What about if you encrypt the zip file?
Actually,
Then if you encrypt it with a password, it's not going to get that.
well, I think it was Microsoft, like Hotmail was, it was reading the email, and if it found the password in the email, it was decrypting the zip file.
I never tried that, but yeah,
Because
yes.
scammers were sending zip files and putting the password, so it was like getting past the antivirus.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah, and someone would fall for that for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so Eddie, I mean, I found PdfiumLib really very easy to use in that regard. Like there's just nothing to it to drop a PDF into the form. And you might do this, someone sends you a PDF, or you're bringing PDFs in through some kind of document management system as part of your, software, like document requirements, or in this case, like the PDF I'm actually showing you, the advanced care directive, this actual file you would send that to a hospital, and the hospital software has to actually be able to bring that up and display it on request. You can certainly display them by using shell execute. Well, that's kind of not very good in a corporate environment. You might have access to shell execute, particularly on the healthcare system. They are very, very keen to not let you do stuff like that. And then I certainly have had negotiations with hospital IT departments in the past where I needed shell execute because that was the only way I could do things, and I really didn't get there easily. And they're like, no, can't have it. So it's obviously, and also shell execute brings up windows that users can leave open in the background, and they can actually run themselves out of system memory while bitching about how you didn't shut the window for them when they finished reading it, because surely you knew when they finished reading it. So for those reasons, I very strongly prefer not to show a PDF document using shell execute. I want to bring it up in my software, in my workflow. So it sits inside what I'm doing with the user, which is why I want to use something like PDFium to show the PDF inside my software rather than outside my software, which is exactly why PDFium exists, so that Google can do that with Chromium. Now, let's say we wanted to get a text out of this document. So here we are. Where is my, oh, it's not running. Here we open now. And I added a button text, and here we are, all the text. It's not that visible, but you know what it says, all the text in the document. It's all the text in the document. Page 1 of 6, Advanced Care Directive for Adults, Advanced Care Directive for Adults, made under the medical blah, 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 blah. All the text. Because the text on the page might be, like, for instance, I put it down here, but PDF reader doesn't know anything about that. It's just got a bunch of pieces of text to draw on the page somewhere in some font. And in fact, it's going to take all the fonting away. And so you might have some Wingdings characters on here, but they will appear as plain text in whatever the Wingdings thing is underneath. So that's the deal, right? It's text on a page with a font, and it's just going to give you the text. But the actual code for this is pretty easy. I iterated all the pages and got all the text from all the pages. But actually, let's have a look at the code for doing that. It's my button here that I added. So I created a string list. I iterated the pages in the document for 0 to page count -1. Added to the string list text from the page for each of the pages, and text from the pages. I said to the page, read all the text from character 0 to character max for the page. And bingo, I read all the text in the document.
Is there any more advanced functions than read, just that read text function?
Well, there is, but what there isn't is reading. So you can character count for a page. You can read a character at a particular offset. You can get the font size in the box for the character at a particular offset, or you can find the character offset for a particular section of the page, and you can read the text at the page. What there isn't is a list of the segments. That's what I did expect to find, the segments of text, because if you go look at this is a segment of text, right? So PDF doesn't give you that. Gnostice probably does. I'm sure it does.
It's always at the same position on the page.
Yeah, until whoever is authoring the form changes a Word document and moves it around a little bit. The other reason that it's tricky, though, it's tricky because see how the font changes? Right here, the font changes. So this is a segment, this is a segment, this is a segment, and this is a segment. So the segment thing is not that useful. But still, it could be useful Oops. So, but you can get text. That's why you can get the box. But you can get the text count for a rectangle. And you can get the text for the rectangle. So you can go backwards and forwards and that how you select text and get the content of the selected text as well.
I guess you control through all the rectangles and sort of go left to right and down.
You could knock yourself out, yes. You can also read the annotations in the form fields if you wanted to get involved in PDF forms. And there's a whole bunch of events that you can hook around form behavior. Form behavior is my least favorite part of PDF, and so I totally ignored it for this presentation. But you could. So back to let's. I didn't look up PDF what flatten means.
Okay.
But I suspect it's to do with the layers and the overlapping things that can go on. So just a little bit more on the document object. You can load from anything, you can save to anything. You can import pages from a different document. So you're doing document wrangling. I don't know how much merge functionality there is, probably nowhere near as much as in Gnostice, which is lower level protocol or lower level API. You can get the file name if it came from a file name and the pages and the attachments.
Can get the font.
You can get the font, yes? Probably.
Well, I guess that each sheet has its own.
Yeah. So then in each page, well, there's attachment. You can get and set the content on the attachment. And then for each page, you can get the page metrics and reason with the page metrics. I'm not sure what flatten means. We can look that up.
Just going back a bit, is all the text in rectangles and the rectangles can go over each other and that sort of stuff?
Totally. Whatever you drew, you can draw layer after layer after layer,
Yeah.
and totally make the user's life extremely hard.
But they are all sort of ultimately in a rectangle somewhere.
Yeah. So here's the documentation. Annotations or form fields will become part of the page contents. There you go. Collapsing annotations and form fields to display an whole page. Which is really tricky because one kind of annotation is a black box. You guys have known about this, right? Lots and lots of people have released redacted PDFs by putting black boxes over the text in the PDF.
Yeah, and then you can just select the text and copy it and paste it as the,
Yeah, well, even if you can't select it, you
Yeah.
can just open the PDF in something like PDFium and get the
Yeah.
text.
Mm.
Yep. So you've got to watch. I mean, we're not the kind of people who are going to release redacted PDFs, right? but people who do release redacted PDFs, you've actually got to redact the PDF and then print it to a PDF. But even then, printing to a PDF, you have to flatten it first, because even printing it to a PDF will just reproduce all those same instructions, right? So even printing to a PDF still doesn't actually redact it. You've got to flatten it, right? Then the flatten it is to say, well, the code goes, oh, this is overwritten by this, so we'll drop this bit out. And even that is not entirely successful.
well, sometimes they just print it out and scan it back in.
Yeah, well, print it up a page, that's thorough. Yeah, scan it. Yeah, release a scan on the bitmap version.
Yeah,
And somewhere I did do that, is do a bitmap version of it. Anyway, back to here. You wanted to go back somewhere? You can search for text in the page. There's classic Chromium functionality. And also there's a web link thing where people click on the web link and you get an event that tells you they've clicked on a web link. Or you can iterate the web links and see what they are.
can we have a look at the TPDF rect?
Yep. It's not that exciting, eh? Let's form view the bitmap. Wait, I'm just going to, before I get to the rect. Yes, the bitmap is only for drawing to the bitmap, which I have done. This bit works. I can't remember why I wanted to do that. There's the rect. Not super exciting.
Yeah, I thought one had some more stuff in it. It's pretty basic.
Pretty normal for a code like that. So that's what I wanted to show you for PDF. You can read a PDF, you can write a PDF, you can display a PDF. Because of what a PDF is, which is what you always have to have in mind, a set of instructions for painting stuff on a page. Working with PDFs is sometimes very easy and sometimes very deceitful, very deceptive, and traps you and tips you over. But also because it's so widely used in the world, in industry, particularly, you know, legal and accounting and so forth. It's often necessary to handle PDF documents, and I've been happy using PDFium. If I was not doing open source, I would still be using Gnostice, I guess.
So Grahame, you mentioned right at the start that you didn't like filling in PDF documents, but can this software fill in where they've got editable fields in the document?
Well, I have the API for that, so I imagine that the answer is yes.
Right. Yeah.
Here's the API for form handling.
Oh, okay. Good. So That was where I came across it. We were trying to convince the Vic Roads to electrify their electronically make their forms so that they could be filled in on the internet.
Yeah.
In software, sorry. I mean,
Yeah, like I said, it's not my favorite thing to do, but it's possible.
But it'd be much easier with software than trying to do it.
Yeah. So we had, I don't want to go prowling through my PDFs right now, but I don't think I have any PDFs that are form. No, actually this one is a form, right? This one is a form. There you go. There's the form. I'm thinking. So why not do it this way then? Yeah, well, there you go. That worked really, really nicely, didn't it? I edited it on my Mac using Mac Preview. And when I went to the Delphi code, there they were, what I had already done. That's pretty sweet, right?
So that just happened.
It did just happen. I didn't realize that Preview automatically saves, but it just did. So, I'm sure the Delphi code doesn't automatically save. No, it doesn't automatically save. But this one does. So obviously the PDFium supports it. It just depends how much control it gives the program over what's going on.
Yeah, I think the application we had was that people wanted to load database data into the PDF. So you actually.
Yeah, the real problem there is,
Yeah.
and this is a PDF problem, not a PDFium problem. We go look at the core for the page. The forms, the form items, they're not identified. They don't have metadata on them. They just have what they are. What text they're allowed to contain. That's somewhere in the PDF spec. This I did look at. I can't see this here, but the PDF form, this has got the stuff you need to know its physical layout, right?
Right, so there's not like a label attached to that form entry, so you can go, give me this label.
No, there's no semantic label.
It just says put an edit at
Yeah,
X, Y.
yeah, the edit doesn't come. And most of the authoring tools wouldn't have a way for you to do that. I know that was something we argued when Adobe came to HL7 and we were talking about a health PDF. That was the whole point, was to be able to do that, but it's actually really, really complicated. We're still 20 years later, we're still working on it.
I think you could have like a hidden something rather than saying, this is the full name for you.
So there's two parts. One is a place to put that, and the other is an interpretation framework for it. And health has been trying to build one for 20 years, and it's gone really, really slow because it's a really hard thing to do. Like it's fine to talk about names and addresses, although is it a full name, is it a surname, is it a family name? Those are not the same thing. Is it a given name? Is it a first given name? Is it initial? Is it gender or a sex or a biological sex or a sex of birth? We're just getting going on the simpler stuff so far. We've been arguing about this for 20 years, but it's a lot easier outside health. Health is actually worst case, because like in most other contexts, you wouldn't care, for instance, about gender or birth sex or biological genetic sex. You're like, nobody else asks that other than health. But in health, we go the distance and all that stuff. So health is the worst case, but for instance, in the US, there's a set of names framework in a framework called, I can't think of its name, NSPM, in it, which defines a set of known formal form labels for government forms. And then I mean, lots of you will have experienced browsers pre-populating forms with your name and address and contact details on some internet form. And you'll also experience that it sometimes gets it wrong, which is all to do with the number of the names of those names, because HTML forms do have a way to tag the form input with the semantic meaning of the form input. And so the browsers guess at what that means. This whole sub-thing, which overlaps with what we're doing in healthcare. But at the moment, that is actually the big problem, and why PDF doesn't really have a very good way of doing it, because there's no agreement anywhere as to what they would mean.
You just have 12 code that represents every different possibility.
Yeah, but someone has to maintain that list, and everybody else has to give them the authority to maintain the list.
That's what they do in health, isn't it? They have 12 digit, each number of digits to each different possible diagnoses or whatever.
Snowman, you're thinking of Snowman, and that's how Snowman works. Yes, a 64-bit integer that's associated with every different concept, and currently they have about 450,000 of them. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Well, I just spent last week with the Snowman team. They're nearly double lots, but they're actually different for some people. Well, there's fun. Like, there's one of their favorite examples. What's the difference between a snail and a slug?
A shell.
Well, it turns out that that's cultural for a start, and it turns out that there's animals that was snails or slugs, depending which way you look at it, that actually defy your categorization. Even though, yes, that's the correct answer for the simple cases in English. But actually, when you actually start listing the rules, it turns out to be way more complicated than that.
The simple dilemma with screws and bolts. What's the difference between a screw and a bolt?
In engineering, bolts as opposed to wood screws, a screw has got threads all the way to the head. A bolt is only threaded for part of the shank.
Whereas if I gave you the thing I've got.
So a screw is a bolt, but a bolt isn't a screw.
But if I gave you one of my shed, which is a self-tapping steel screw that's got like a spade device at the very end of the screw rather than a thread. It's not a bolt though,
No,
it's a screw.
it's a screw.
Yeah,
in
so
that
every
context.
we play this game a lot.
Bottom of an argument about this.
Yes, yes.
Although just use
Right.
terms.
Right, no, and also, but this is an old game that we play at health standards space. Any division, any categorization you draw, we'll find a case to blow your categorization. Categorization is one of the hardest problems we have.
Mm.
Yep. Anyway, I've shown you what I wanted to show you. I hope that was useful.
I don't know how easy this would be to do, but listening to what you were saying about like reading in the PDF and getting the text would be to, which is this is probably a practical use for me, but would be to read in a bank statement and actually translate it into, you know, a comma delimited list of date, pay amount.
That'd be
for
awesome.
being able to analyze it.
That'd be awesome. And there's a name for that whole industry called PDF scraping. And I've even worked with some of the engineers in the States who do that in healthcare. And they have these big long libraries, and they're all now AIing themselves up with LLMs. So in the hope that LLMs make them be able to better read PDF documents. But reading PDF documents is particularly tricky because text does not have an order. And so you they have those whole layers of reverse engineering around trying to re-guess the order from the physical layer. They would very much, walk through the text, actually rebuilding the physical layer and then double guessing the physical.
Yeah, like I had a go at that just for it was basically a voice generator for Excel. And so you can sort of work out the columns and stuff, but then say one column the line goes into two lines. So then it splits down instead of it being the same level as all the other parts column, it's half a bit and then we work out is it belongs to that other one or is it the one before the one after, and it's a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a solvable problem, but the other, I mean, I actually went to a meeting in Boston years ago with the scraping industry in healthcare. There's whole mega companies, billion-dollar companies, whose whole business is based on scraping HTML forms or Windows apps or console mode apps or PDF documents or HTML documents to extract information out of healthcare systems which don't otherwise make it available and make it available for some business processing use. Billion-dollar companies doing this, and they're like, it's a hard business to be in because all the time somebody upgrades something somewhere and we're suddenly broken, and we've got the software should know that it's broken, which is a whole other thing, and then we have to fix it, and we have to fix it like this. And we were in the process of giving them an API. They were very, very happy to have an API with a standard API that they could all use. But it was just fascinating listening to them and thinking, like, have you guys ever heard of the accessibility API? There's an accessibility API that Microsoft wrote that allows people with poor vision to work through your API. And actually, it's an API that works inside your handle structure of your application, and reads the names of the classes and the names of the inputs because they are named in Windows, the class names in Windows, and then actually reads that out to the user so the user knows which form field they're in when they're in it. And of course, you never thought when you were designing your forms to make those names useful for a non-visual person or a person with poor vision to read your forms. But they know that you didn't think about that because they're killing themselves trying to figure out what you're doing. And so are these companies who use the same API to reverse engineer your user interface. Fascinating, isn't it?
So I haven't sort of looked into it, but I recall seeing a European stamp for invoices that had XML. I guess it must have been an XML attachment. So you could have the visual PDF and then the XML attachment that actually had the machine readable invoice here.
Yeah, and Australia is an open banking specification being worked on for Australia that does cover invoicing. I don't know where that, I saw a guy present on that a couple of years ago. I haven't heard from the open banking guys since then because I don't really care about banking. But they were working on that. But there's no one doing banking in the States because the banks are like, nah, I don't care. Stuff the users, stuff the consumers. And so nobody's doing a standard interbank banking API. The banks are all on their own. The little States is lovely.
Seem to be a few industries.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but usually the industries figure it out and go, no, that's not actually a good idea.
Not to do with dealing with EDI, the business to business stuff. All the big retailers all do their own thing.
Yeah,
Sort of
right.
loosely based on.
They're now standardizing on a format called BBB. I ran into it somewhere. People always come to me because I lead the healthcare equivalent. People are always coming to me going, why don't you guys not do your own thing and just use other businesses? I just get that about once a month at the moment. And I'm like, you have no idea. But there's a new trading API framework and so there's a bunch of things happening, but banking is not being solved internationally because the US banks don't want it to be solved.
Just back to PDF.
Yep.
Looks like it'd be fairly easy to make a program with concatenate PDFs.
Yeah, they had the API for that, sure.
So pulling out a whole table, all of that would be very trivial. I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure what would happen with fonting, but if you look at the API here on the PDF document,
But the font's stored for the whole document, are they?
yeah, you can attach the fonts. There's nothing here about the fonts actually, but you can import pages from another document at a particular point, which is what you are asking about.
Oh, yeah.
What about export pages?
Well, you create a new PDF and then import it.
Yeah, all you can do on the page, you can do, this is the only way to export. On the page, you can do page draw to a PDF bitmap,
Oh,
which does your export for you, but you can only export to a bitmap. Because what else could you do? Or you can scrape out the text or the attachments or the annotations.
well, I guess that would be quite handy for your redaction thing.
PDF, yeah, bitmap,
You don't
yeah.
really end up with a bitmap thing.
Yeah, but if you're trying to redact stuff, you don't care about helping other people.
Well, at one point, banks were doing PDFs, their statement PDFs as bitmaps, so you couldn't go in and edit them. And they were a pain and a half because you couldn't search them either.
Yeah, no, I got the last time I had an operation, I asked for my clinical record and I got a scanned, like physical scanned PDF. So that every page was just a full, it was a JPEG actually, because it had JPEG jaggies all over the place. It was really awesome. I was like, "True, so this is hospital. Great. You gave me you gave me 155 JPEG pages. Lovely of you." Yeah. And that was the local Melbourne hospital here in Melbourne. And the only reason I didn't pay, they were going to charge me $1 a page or something, but I was mates with the CIO, so.
So you got page rates.
I got it for free.
Yeah.
I got a mate.
Having to export something for itself. And I had Adobe Acrobat at that time, and it did an amazingly good job. I don't know what it was on, but something like a bank statement or something. You know, I've fought with lots of things, but in that instance, it worked really well.
I've got a mate. This is e-patient Dave. He's a friend of mine. He's one of the most well-known consumer digital health advocates in the States, internationally famous. He cancer survivor and a bunch of stuff. Anyway, he went to a hospital for something, and the hospital refused to give him his records. And he wrote to the CIO and said, because he knew how to contact the CIO, and he said, "You've not given me my records." And the CIO back said, "No, we don't have to." And he says, "Well, actually you do, because you certified to the government that you can, and you took the government's money to say that you can, and that you would, and you're actually legally required to do so. So give me my records." And the CIO wrote back and said, "Nah, I don't think so." He said, "Fine, I'll see you in the page on the front page of the New York Times," because totally could. And the CIO wrote back, "Oh, you need these records? Here's the records." It's still all about who you know and who you are.
So today for all the other 1,000 customers,
Yeah, all the other million customers, they can suck on it. Yes. But e-patient Dave gets what he wants, particularly when I'm helping advising him. There's a bunch of us in the background advising him on how to actually really land that one hard. So he got his records. But in the States, you are legally entitled to any healthcare record that has your name in it. It's your civil right. In Australia, we have no such right.
What does FOI not give you?
FOI doesn't give you, FOI doesn't have anything to do with medical records, I think. There are hospitals are encouraged to provide your medical records to you, and policy is that they should, but there's no civil right, there's no law that they have to.
Okay. And probably when you actually want to help them, it's probably when they won't do anything. If they've done something, you know, try doing something.
No, see, you completely don't understand hospitals. You think they have any idea? They have no idea. They don't know.
The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is.
It's not so much that, it's just that there's 1,000 left hands and 1,000 right hands. A hospital, from my point of view, if you look up hospital in the dictionary, you get a very large coordination problem. It's a massive problem in hospitals, just coordinating everything that's going on. So, yeah, they don't know what's going on. They don't know what's in the record. They don't know whether they're doing anything wrong or not, because they're trying to do their best all the time. And maybe if there's a court case, they already know that there's a problem. But if it's a court case, then they're going to be handing the records over to the court. That they have no choice about. So, anyway.
It's really interesting. You've given me some ideas to try.
oh, thank you. It's good.
I see a couple of comments that I hadn't noticed, but yes, the date of birth, we're going on the comments, the date of birth allows alpha characters because they didn't say otherwise, because no doubt looking at this form that I was showing you, they certainly wrote that in Word. In Word, so Word didn't have that kind of control. And I'll check to see whether you can name fields in PDF. No, you can give them a name, but there's no standard for naming them.
It might be, well, if you control the PDF, that might not be an issue.
Maybe. I'll investigate while I sit here.
Yeah, well, presumably a lot of PDF forms are read by the creator.
I don't know how much they read them. Really don't.
Well, no, if the text department sends you a PDF form to fill in, and you fill it in and send it back.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be manually.
Oh,
Nah, come on.
What is it, the people in the work type people, probably Word document for this. Jobs, job. That stuff, full of Word documents. So stick it in storage. A lot of people fill in documents in Word.
In Word. Yeah.
Or giving them their CV documents, presumably.
Yeah, Word.
All the PDF documents that you see these days. Oh, this is coming in my mind.
Word is, yeah, filling in a line gives you direct control. Word is easier to read than PDF.
Well, we've basically finished, though. So time for a cup of tea.
Pretty close. I think, right. Well, while I'm here, has anyone got any, for next month, I want people to rock up with their software that they've been playing with and tell us a bit about it, Grahame.
Libraries and
Stuff you got from your, what was that?
Price.
Symposium.
13 Friday.
Yeah. I thought you could have listened. Haven't you been talking about that? You going to be here next week?
I'll be here, but I passed on the prizes, so
Oh, that's right.
I'm let off on this.
Oh, this one, actually, you did quite a good talk on that, graffiti thing.
Oh, Imogen.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a few years ago now. I haven't even powered up Delphi for 2 or 3 weeks now, so.
Oh, retire. It's that.
But.
Oh,
Yeah, I've got a rich text library that I got from last year's symposium. And I'm having a look at.
Oh, that was all sort of with,
Yeah,
yes.
rich text is interesting because it's a sort of survival of something so primitive. That's a sort of like grow and
It's sort of an easy way to put well, rich text into your program.
oh yeah.
So you can put just bold and highlight stuff. But
Well, the other big thing about rich text is it's like basically just a stream. So you can make a rich text file and put a placeholder in, and like XXX, and then put John McDonald did,
oh, yeah.
and then it will render perfectly as intended. So
It's make yourself a template.
yeah, well, I think when I demoed it, like even more years ago, that's what I did. I made a template in Word with some placeholders, like nice field names that PDF doesn't have. So an end user could save it as an RTF, and the program could just import it and fill in the fields.
So I just thought I would show you because I took the time to test it down. Here's the form, date of birth, and then here's the input. And so here's the source, one of these two objects here is this bit, and the other bit is the mouse over that appears only in Acrobat, your date of birth.
Oh,
That appears. So it's your date of birth. So your date of birth is the title for the input. But see, the input doesn't have any metadata about what kind of input it is, only its physical layout. And then there's text, which is this text here. Yeah, so you can give them a name, but this one is not named, and I've never seen them. My exposure is very far from broad, but I haven't seen them be named. But in Acrobat, if you've got full Acrobat, then you have this dialog form here, which you can use to edit the text field, and the general tab here has a name where you can name the field, and then the name would appear somewhere in here.
Okay.
We've got date of birth with the capital D.
Sorry?
With date of birth with the capital D, is that somewhere over the higher?
You're right. I don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe there's sort of separate bits. This is a text entry bit.
Different rectangle somewhere.
Yeah, must be one of these. Must be one of those.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I know. You're right. I didn't pick up on it. Good pick, sorry. Yeah. Encrypted.
But you know,
And Jason, yes, I agree that the accessibility interface can be utilized to create a UI testing framework. And the primary benefit of doing that would be that disabled people would have an easier time using your software. I've been doing a bit of work with disability advocates around healthcare, something in the healthcare system, but they've been telling me stories about what life is like for people who have poor vision. But it's not getting easier.
the W3C seems to have a lot of stuff about, forms about resolving web interfaces.
Yeah, I've actually been working on the accessibility guidelines to make something I do, a website I produced, conformant to the accessibility guidelines. And it's very difficult. And the first round, they said, you will conform to all these rules. And everyone said, no, we won't. And so now it's kind of like you self-declare which rules you think are going to be useful for your audience. And then you declare, and then you conform to the rules you self-declared. That kind of makes sense because, for instance, one of the accessibility guidelines is that your website should be readable at like a year 6 level comprehension level. But like I'm writing a technical standard for underpinning healthcare. It's totally irrelevant for a cognition level to be applicable to a 6-year-old. Impossible and irrelevant, right? So in that sense, it does make sense to be able to opt in to saying, we're not targeting people with limited cognition. But on the other hand, there's lots of websites that totally should be go, nah, that's too hard. We don't need to cater to them. And so the self-declaration is totally an issue as well. But the thing that I've learned to pay most attention to, you can design tab traps. You guys know what a tab trap is? You never heard the concept, and neither had I.
It's where you have to have a mouse.
Yeah, if you're tabbing through the fields and then you get stuck in a single control, you can't tab out of. You can tab into it, but not out of it. Or you can tab to it and then you switch between two controls that tab to each other. And it's particularly easy to set that up in HTML. It's harder in a Delphi form. And it's also totally a trap if you're laying forms out by code, like I like to do. You've got to remember to pay attention to tab order, but it's also easy to forget, particularly for forms you don't care about much and not paying attention to what the tab order is. But people with restricted vision, the software works through the tabs, works through the forms and the HTML forms by tabbing through them and telling them what they're at by reading the context around what they tab to. And so that's the one thing that I learned, is the thing you should pay most attention to.
Well, tab orders, even on people that don't need the accessibility, tab order, it's one that shows off the polish of the program.
It does, although, like having been here, you tend to focus on tab order for workflow purposes.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. And so you do some forms and you do some tabs on the form and they're perfect, but others are not so perfect. But it's just a reminder to us all.
Wonder how hard it'd be to automate checking for tab traps.
There is a plugin you can get from W3C that you can plug into Chrome, but not into any other browsers, that actually tells you about this stuff, tells you you've got a tab trap.
It's probably the sort of thing that Pascal Analyzer would do for Delphi forms. Because it does all sorts of weird and wonderful checks.
I found it quite useful. I don't remember that being something, but it's quite a while since I've been.
Well, maybe they probably need something to add to their program.
Yeah, along with all the 500 other things that they're doing there.
Now there's a challenge, Jason. Jason's not sure you can have a tab trap in a DFM.
Well, maybe if you hand edit this, you could possibly.
Like typically you get a tab trap in an HTML form when you start adding tabs. So let's try it.
Challenge accepted.
If you tab into a memo, can you tab out of it?
That's a good question.
Or does the memo just eat the tabs?
Okay, so we're gonna let's do this. We're gonna put an edit and an edit and a memo and an edit. I don't need to add. Hang on, I'm not displaying. I should display for this. I don't need to add labels, do I? And it's really, I can't zoom in on the form designer in the way I can on the code, can I? No, only by this thing, which I don't want.
Is that a high DPI?
Extremely high DPI.
Yeah.
But the tab order, I can even see this tab order. Edit 1, edit 2, memo 3. That's right. That's what I want. So we test your question first. Okay. Tab. That works. But I can probably set up a tab trap. Yeah. Tab stop, tab order. What's tab stop again? Sorry, just have a
So
What are you doing?
Now I want tabs. There you go, want tabs. So I think want tabs equals true. Tab, 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 stop, tab trap.
Right.
So
Will
we
control
can-
tab get you out of it?
So, oh, well, let's give it a try. Well, those be complicated on here because my friend OSX. No. Alt tab did, but that didn't help. Alt tab didn't help us.
The Alt tab is something else. Is it Alt tab's next application?
Shift tab. No, that's a tab trap. So if you love your disabled users, you would not set want tabs to true. There you go, Jason. One finally. So then let's go and will we use a page control? Is that what we should use? Where's page control? Is that the right thing? And a page and a page. And we'll put these two. Nah, that didn't work. We'll put them on here. And we'll put these two on here. Out of order. That's what we want, right? If you guys could see, we've got a tab with a memo and an edit and a tab with an edit and an edit. And the tab order, oops.
If you turn off tabs on the memo, want tabs on.
Yeah, I did turn that off, yes. The tab order. Page control. And then the tab order. Edit 2, edit 1. So it doesn't really matter, but we'll fix that up. And then the tab control here, tab order. That's what we want. So let's run that. We're now in the memo. Oh, it's still trapping tabs. Sorry. I thought I turned that off. In the memo in the edit box, tab sheet, arrow, tab, 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 arrow.
We're not seeing this.
Is it running that slow? Whoops, sorry. Okay, all right. So I'm here. I tab between the tab sheet, the memo, and the edit. And then if I arrow, yeah, arrow, and then I tab between those. But W3C considers that a tab trap. I mean, you make your own decisions, but W3C calls that a tab trap.
Sort of nice if you can avoid going through all of the fields in the whole
Yeah, yeah.
listed structure.
So I mean, it's not like here's another UI I've got where you've actually got different forms. Is this coming up? Yeah, different forms for these options on the left. This form is completely and utterly not limited vision accessible. Right? You are totally, if you don't have good vision, you just can't navigate this form at all. Even though I love to use it as a user interface. So, well, that's one reason why the W3's backed off the recommendation, because people are like, you can't possibly think that we're going to design all
Yes.
Yeah, I do not know. I looked at the accessibility guidelines and quailed when I looked at them. Oh, hang on, this wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to stop sharing, sorry about that. WK.
Yeah, my lady who has, she's got some dual screen where she very good vision. Some of the stuff she started with. Tracy made screen.
Well, at least the WK form itself is accessible.
Yeah, it would have been pretty bad if it wasn't.
Well, actually, I reckon this fails the accessibility guidelines. It's not enough contrast.
Oh, yeah, but you've got a screen reader and they're not reading, but can tell you about it.
Yeah, no, but this is not enough contrast for people who are colorblind. There's rules in the WCAG about accessibility for colorblindness. And one of them is about red contrast levels. Anyway. It's worth reading that, but it's also very painful to read the WCAG. The full guidelines. It's really hard. But there is a plugin. Right. There, the accessibility Chrome plugin. So you can get that in Chrome. And it will actually tell you whether your website is conformant to some degree or other. So I was just asking myself, had I done anything interesting with Delphi recently? And I have done something extremely interesting with Lazarus. The Lazarus inbuilt memory manager is unreliable. It very easily fragments memory. Do not use it. In other words, if you are working in Lazarus, the first unit in your users clause should be fastmem4 for Windows apps and cmem for non-Windows apps. No exceptions.
What's the non-Windows one?
CMEM. CMEM. It's just an API onto the standard Linux memory manager.
It would be surprising that something so fundamental would be flaky.
Certainly wasn't a conclusion I came to quickly, but I had code that was run in Delphi. It was a very big data processing run. It would take 45 minutes. In Delphi, it wouldn't leak memory at all. In Lazarus, it bombed out halfway through with a memory utilization of 128 gigabytes, which is 120 wasted memory. And the only thing that I could fix it with, I checked very, very thoroughly. I was not leaking the thing. The only thing I fixed it was putting fast MM4 in, which fixed it totally. And then I was running something that wasn't leaking so dramatically, but in a server. And I went back and the server was running at about 5% of its usual throughput. And it was hammering the CPU. And the server would get like that after a few days. And then I replaced the server memory with CMEM, and it suddenly stopped behaving like that. You know, it's good to be up indefinitely. So if you're using Lazarus, do not use the inbuilt memory manager.
There's probably not too many people that are using that amount of memory in their apps. So
Although it's not that unusual to do data processing on a 120 gig file, 120 meg file, sorry, that just work through the data processing it.
yeah.
That's not that unusual.
Oh, I thought it said gig, the thing that.
Now, there are people doing that too, particularly people doing geo mapping stuff,
Yeah,
but or our ontology stuff. But in this case, I was just doing a lot of creating and disposing of objects, and it just wasn't getting the memory back properly. So,
Yeah, I think that, well, Dolphins, they had that problem before they went to fast MM4.
it was never quite that bad, but yes, fast MM4 is a very good memory manager. But you need there's a special Lazarus fork of fast MM.
what did you did?
Huh?
That you did, or was it? Something?
No, I didn't do that one. This is not my stuff. I'm not doing that.
There's quite a few projects that you've done to scratch your own itch.
There's a few years over the years. Yeah. One day I'm going to resurrect my word processor for Lazarus. But it's a hard problem.
See? Yeah, that was great.
Always.
Covered a lot of ground.